I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. 'Tis I, James Tyson. Today I bring you Brooks Agnew. As a kid who grew up in Pasadena, California, and entered the Air Force in 1973, graduated top in his class in electronics engineering. He's since received his Bachelor of Science with honors in chemistry from Tennessee Tech University and is a certified quality engineer, a Six Sigma Master, and a member of the Society of Automotive Engineering, which is kind of cool because not only is he a member of the Automotive Engineering Society, he's actually the CEO of a company called EV Fleet. That's Echo Victor Fleet, or Electronic Vehicle Fleet. And he's got this cool little truck called the Condor, which is the lowest drag of any electronic truck ever, with about 140 plus mile range. So if you're zipping around town delivering things and you don't go over 140 miles during the day and you hate buying gas, you should look up EV Fleet. Just Google that and see his truck. It's kind of cool. Now, Brooks has actually published 10,000 articles and technical documents. He's authored 7 Amazon best-selling books with 10 titles in print, and he's one of the world's most recognized voices in the disclosure movement. His radio show that's been on the internet for 14 years called X Squared Radio is the #1 talk radio program in America on Sunday nights, which is kind of cool. If you want to Google that, that's X Squared. That's X, the number 2, radio, or it's X Squared Radio, or heck, just go to brooksagnew.com. Again, brooksagnew.com, and find the links over to his radio show if you want to have something new to listen to on a Sunday night. He's been featured on dozens of TV and hundreds of radio programs, as well as numerous scientific documentaries. He is still hanging out with people like you and I, the woo-woo crowd. He just got back from the UK, where he's bouncing around Scotland and England, going to a number of conferences over there. He's going to be at Disclosure Con out at Pine Top Lakeside, Arizona, October 5th, which is next Saturday. Now, if you're listening to this after October 5th, 2019, you missed it. But that's where he was. But you can always catch him again at a number of the other places, anything from Contact at the Desert to some of the other events that are coming up. We'll touch a little bit on those. One of the things I wanted to talk to him about, and which is why I've dragged him kicking and screaming out to the show, is he's got a book out, and it's not his newest book, but it is his, I guess, the second to his newest books. It's called Remembering the Future, Physics of the Soul and Time Travel. Again, that's the physics of the soul and time travel. And some of the things I want to talk to him about, or we're going to be talking about, are the 5 forces of the universe, including consciousness and how that affects us, the science of proper dreaming for future manifestation. Let me say that again, the science of proper dreaming for future manifestation, and how he describes manifestation from kind of that scientific and spiritual way of looking at things. There's tons in his book, but these are the kind of things that I want to drill into a little bit deeper. Also, I want to touch on, before we go, we are going to touch on overcoming the 5G environment. That's the new 5G system that's being pumping out all over the place. I think Atlanta, Georgia, has got the 4 primary iPhone carriers have already hooked up into the 5G. And we'll talk about whether or not we are canaries in the coal mine of an experiment in electromagnetic influence on us, and whether we're all going to basically, eventually, our DNA is going to turn up like an egg in a microwave and just splat all over the place. But before I get to Brooks, I want to thank Lauren, who last month won. I shouldn't say won. She was gifted. Her name was drawn and gifted a past life regression. I want to thank Carrie, who was gifted the psychic reading, and Apolla, who was gifted the astrological chart and reading. Their names were drawn from those who support the Oracles of James Tyson on Patreon. I've got more names to draw on the 15th of October here. So if you don't have your name in, or if you're not a subscriber per se, but a supporter on Patreon, why don't you go to the website, The Oracles with James Tyson, check on the little donate button, sign up on Patreon, and for $3 a month, you can get your names into those draws for gifts. Plus, it kind of helps me on my little travels going to the different conferences, and when I get that 2,222 people signed up, I'll be taking 2 people or sometimes even 4 people, depending how much money is in the kitty, on trips too. So let's check off your paranormal bucket list and see if we can get you going to a paranormal conference, or if you want to go see ghosts out at Gettysburg or UFOs out in Sedona, get your name in there and we'll do those draws. And you wonder why I'm being so nice. Well, I'm not being that nice. I'm coming with you. So if you do go to a conference, I get to come with you. So that kind of helps me pay for my trips to go out and do stuff. But I'm going to be bringing supporters along too. And you'll end up being on my show because I'll be interviewing you on your enjoyment of this kind of thing, going on to these little tours. Unless, of course, you go out to Gettysburg, a ghost scares you and you die. Yeah, there'd be an insurance claim, I'm guessing, and a civil suit. So maybe I won't interview you. So it sounds like a good time to bring Brooks in. Brooks, how you been?
I'm doing pretty well. A little ragged after 3 weeks on the road, running around to different conferences, signing books and shaking hands. But you know how it is. If you don't play the concerts, they won't buy the albums.
Yes. Now, where have you been so far? In the last
let's see. I've been to London. I've been to Edinburgh. Been to Glasgow, Stranraer, Scotland, then to Belfast, Dublin, Cardiff, Wales, and then back to London, and then zipped over to Seattle, Washington, then down to Mount Shasta, back to Seattle, Washington, and this weekend I'm going to Phoenix and then back home to Charlotte.
Nice. Now, you're going to Phoenix. You're going to be hitting up Disclosure Con on October 5th
yes.
To October 6th. That's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. Doc Skinner does a fabulous job putting events together, and he is a fantastic human being, working his butt off to put this event together. This is the second year of Disclosure Con, and last year it was wildly successful. So he deserves it, and I love going there.
Perfect. Now, I was there last week or the weekend before, and it was great. The weather's a lot nicer than the 40-something degrees we're having right now up in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, what were you down in Mount Shasta for?
That was the Avatars of the Earth. It was put on by Tracy Ash out of London. She does a great job. It was a little esoteric, but I brought Remembering the Future, the Physics of the Soul and Time Travel lecture to that. It was well received, and I sold all my books, so how could I complain?
Oh, yeah. You're just going to have a boxcar following you from place to place well, I guess it would have been a little harder in the UK, but when you get back here, at least stock up and ready to go for Disclosure Con. Now, you mentioned the Physics of the Soul and Time Travel. Now, fascinating book, Remembering the Future, the Physics of Soul and Time Travel, and you talk about receiving the key or the secret. It opens the abundance of the universe. Mm-hmm. What sparked that book?
Oh, that's a great question. I had gotten back into meditation in the summer of 2006. So I had a large engineering project for the state of Washington, which I completed in the middle of 2007. And I moved the operation to just outside of Boise, Idaho, a little tiny town called Glens Ferry, Idaho, which is an inexpensive place to have a 90,000 square foot shop. So while I was there, I started getting back into the meditation that I brushed up on in 2006. And my teacher was Drunvalo Melchizedek and also Maureen Saint Germain. And one of the neat things about this kind of meditation is once you get into the meditation, you have a sort of landing spot, like your landing page on a website. Every time you go into the meditation, you go to this landing spot, and then you can go anywhere, anytime that you want, and you can listen, and you can observe what is going on. So I said, well, I wonder what would happen if I went to the year 2015. So I just went into meditation, and I tried to go to the future to look at the year 2015. And when I got there, I opened up my eyes, and I realized that we didn't make it. The weather was all screwed up. The economy was upside down. The presidency itself was collapsing. It was that winter, it snowed on the snow from the previous year. So I knew something was way wrong with the weather. No one was talking about global warming or anything like that in 2007. But I came back out of meditation back in the year 2007, and I was so moved by it that I said, what can I do? What can I possibly do to nudge the human race so that we choose a different future than that one? And so I started to put together this book. It started out with travels that I had done sort of astrally while I was in meditation. I kept going back to this other planet, a planet I lived on before I came here, is the way it felt. And I went there hundreds of times, and I got a great feeling about it, a great peace about it. I realized that world was destroyed about 1,800 years ago, and now I'm here in this body on this world. But it gave me perspective. So I started there with the book, and I continued forward. And at the time, I just finished teaching a college algebra, and I was an adjunct professor, and I had a bunch of adults in my math class. I was concerned about them learning certain aspects of the mathematics just for the test and then forgetting them and never using them again in their lives. And one of those sections was the section on Fibonacci. So we were covering the Fibonacci numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, starting with 0 and adding 1 to 0 and getting 1, and then adding 1 to 1, get 2, and then 1 to 2 and get 3. It's the method by which cells divide, and bacteria divides, and DNA unfolds and duplicates itself and then refolds back up. The periodic chart lays out on it, planets lay out on it around stars, and solar systems and galaxies in the universe. Everything lays out based on this method of increase. So in preparing for the class, I decided to take my calculator, and I just said, what would happen if we didn't start at 0? What happens if we just started, somewhere along the number line? So I picked two numbers. In the book, I used 75 and 216. Add them together, you get 291. So, okay, now I got the first three numbers, 1, 2, 3. So I took the second and added to the third, just like I was starting down the Fibonacci, yellow brick road, and you get 507. So you continue on, and when you get to the 8th iteration of this addition process, you take the 7th sum and divide it into the 8th sum, and you are on the 1.618 to 1. You're right back on the golden mean. This is phi. This is this magic constructive interference slope that nature uses to create matter out of energy. So at first I thought, well, that was lucky. Let's try another couple numbers. So I tried another couple numbers, and it worked. So I said, well, maybe it only works with whole numbers. Maybe it doesn't work with decimals. So I put some, non-integers in there, and it worked again. So then I put fractions in, and it worked again. So then I put irrational numbers, imaginary numbers. I even put functions into it, and it worked. Every single time the addition worked. So I said, well, if it works with these random numbers, starting anywhere, any size, any difference, maybe it will work with energy. And so I made the assumption, and I think it's sound, that human observation, because we are the only beings that we know of on this planet that can perceive time, human observation is actually a source of energy. It's actually an energy input. So from there, I made the jump that if a human decided to put two energy inputs using their intention, using their particular personality signature, their, shall we call it a soul address, two places in time, and you added those together to get a result, you have your three numbers, you have your three values. So you continue forward to the 8th iteration, and energy, you are now back on that slope of spontaneous generation. That was pretty incredible. So I decided to put it to the test. And yes, the adults in the class remembered it after the test. I spoke to a couple years later. So what was the game? I mean, what were we trying to accomplish? What we were trying to accomplish is someone put their intention somewhere out in the future, like say they wanted to be something, or they wanted to do something, or they wanted to own something like a motorcycle or a car or a house or a piece of land, or they wanted to manifest, a certain type of mate to meet. Mm-hmm. They could do this, and that signature would put a sort of sound, a vibration, a frequency out, and it would go out in all directions, all 360 degrees throughout all time and eternity. Not as a flat plane, like dropping a pebble into a pond, but as a sphere. So, like any, energy signal put into a set of energy, let me make that a little more clear. Let's say you had an acoustic guitar and it was out of the case and you were leaned it up against the wall with the strings facing the room, and then you turned your stereo up really loud, like I don't know what kind of music you listen to, but let's just say it was AC/DC or Led Zeppelin or something like that. Somewhere in that music, that guitar would sound like somebody just grabbed a pick and plucked the string. It would just ring out. It would ring so hard it would slap against the fretboard. It would draw your attention.
Yeah.
But what actually happened is, in that chaotic frequency of the room, all that sound bouncing around the room, one of those frequencies was powerful enough and tuned exactly to that string, that the string absorbed that energy out of the room, and it rang out its own sound. Now, if we could measure how much energy it took to ring that string, and we have instruments that can do that, we would call that an absorbance peak. As it turns out, all matter in the universe, everything, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, sulfur, every single bond, double bond, triple bond, every molecule in the universe has a guitar string, has an exact frequency that it and only it rings to. So when you put that dream out there in the future, that sound goes out 360 degrees throughout all time and eternity. And the things that will vibrate sympathetically from that signal are going to begin ringing, just like that string on the guitar. Where people made the mistake with the book The Secret is they said, well, just go cut the picture out of the magazine and put it behind magnets on your refrigerator and go look at it. Every time you go to get a beer or some cottage cheese, look at that picture on the fridge. And if you look at it enough times, eventually you're going to have it. What they're effectively saying is just go out in the future and bang that bell. Hit it with a mallet as hard as you can every single time you go into the future. And sooner or later, that bell's going to be real. And millions of people did that, and nothing happened. Oh, the book sold like this. And Oprah Winfrey was happy with it. But they missed the point. The point was, yeah, ring the bell, but then go back to the past, which is the present, and look for the things that are vibrating, like the strings on that guitar, and put energy into each of those things. And then those frequencies will also ring out at 360 degrees throughout time and all eternity and go back to the future. And the universe absolutely, positively has no choice but to deliver you that thing that you manifested. These are rules in the universe that are obeyed without exception.
Okay. Just for my own personal catching up with what you're saying here. Now I'm sitting around and I want to manifest something. And I think, I really need a new car, a new bicycle, new part for my motorcycle. That basically, that energy, that thought is actually an energy that leaves me in a sphere and just goes out.
Yeah.
And that sphere continues to go and obviously overlaps other people's spheres as they want their stuff, and like a bundle of grapes moving out. And it's timeless. It's not flat. It's not linear. It's like a mini Big Bang of energy coming out of me, a thought energy that is putting out to, as we say, to the universe, I want something. Or I need something. We get our needs, I believe, far before we get our wants, but it goes out. And
I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
While I was in Idaho, I was working on this project. We were building some ion towers for a biodiesel plant that I had designed. And I had a team of welders that were working with me, and we would go across the street and have breakfast in the morning. And I had at the time I was driving a Dodge Dakota, and it was pretty much wore out. It had a couple 100,000 miles on it. So I mentioned to the welders, you know what? I think I want to buy a newer truck. And they said, really? So what are you looking for? I said, well, I've been thinking about it. I want an emerald green Dodge Ram with a diesel, no older than 1999. I want an automatic 2-wheel drive, and I want to spend less than $10,000 on it. And they went, they laughed. They said, first of all, you're not going to find a 2-wheel drive truck around here in Idaho. Forget about that. And second of all, why all the details? Why don't you just go shopping for a truck, and when you find what you like, buy it? I said, that's not the way manifestation works. I know exactly what I want. And the next day, we were at breakfast, and those little, like, Car Trader free magazines, that are in the rack when you go. Yep. Well, he pulled one out, and he was thumbing through it while we were, I don't know, eating our ham and cheese omelets or whatever. And all of a sudden, he went, son of a... I said, what? He said, you're not going to believe this. There's an emerald green 1999 Dodge Ram diesel pickup, automatic 2-wheel drive, $9,500. I said, where is it? He said, right down in Boise. I said, let's go buy it. Drove my Dakota over there, traded the truck in, counted out, I think, about $8,700 in the difference, and drove it away. And I said, that is how manifestation works. That is the only pickup truck that would have met my needs, and the universe had no choice but to deliver it because I sent the frequency out so specifically.
Here's one for you from 4 weeks ago. I've got a 2017 Harley-Davidson Street Glide Ultra. As you were, Road Glide Ultra. And it's red. It's got fancy pinstriping from Sturgis on it. It's got a 107 engine, and I kept looking at it going, next time, I really want the black on black, like all the engine blacked out, all the chrome, no chrome because it's a bugger to polish, with the new 114 engine, I love the storage room, this upgraded sound system, GPS, nav system, the whole bit. And I thought, you know what? I really would like one of those instead of this one.
Mags or spokes?
Spokes.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's mags.
Mags.
So I'm thinking about it, and I put that, I literally told a friend of mine, this is what I like. And he says, well, they don't make those. And they don't make that model black on black. I got a phone call from the local dealership by mistake. They thought I was paying over 10 or something % on my interest and said, hey, you know what, we've got some new models we'd like you to look at. And they left a message, and I couldn't make it. Actually, I couldn't make it. I was driving to Sturgis. But they said, we should call us when you get a chance. And I thought, nah, whatever. I don't really want to call them. But I looked them up online, and I went, holy crap, there's the black on black bike. Exactly what I wanted. And I called them back, and they said, yeah, we made a mistake by phoning you. But, if you're interested, we've got these new bikes, and we'll probably with what we'll pay you for the old bike and on the return, and you'll end up paying a monthly payment, probably $100 a month less. I'm like, okay, this is weird, but yeah, okay, let's go do it. So Sunday I went in and got the paperwork and ordered my bike. But that's how fluky that is. It's like they phoned me by mistake.
How about
I wouldn't have even looked at it. Wouldn't even looked at the new models coming out.
How about that? Yeah. So, and it works all the time. Now, whenever I go to these conferences, inevitably I meet somebody, and I ask them this question: what is your dream? I did it day before yesterday, and this young kid said, well, I want $1 million. I said, really? So exactly $1 million. What would you do with $1 million? He said, well, I just want a place to live, and I want something to eat, and I want a truck. I said, so really what you want is a place to live and plenty to eat and a truck. He said, well, yeah. I said, well, the reason maybe you don't have it is because you're telling the universe how it's going to come to you. Through $1 million, and maybe that's not the way it's going to happen. By the way, I said, what kind of truck do you want? He said, well, I want a diesel 4x4. I said, a Ford? He said, no, a Dodge. I said, oh, all right, what color? He said, black. I said, automatic or stick? He said, I like driving a stick. I said, what year? He said, 10 years old. I said, okay, so now we're talking about a black Dodge diesel, 4-wheel drive, stick shift, 2009. Now you've got it specific. Now, what kind of apartment are you looking for? And we started from there. And I said, look, the more details you give me, the clearer it becomes in your mind, and the sharper and more focused that frequency is. The universe will begin to resonate with it. And forget about the $1 million. It may come, but that's maybe not the way the universe is going to deliver it to you.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in getting needs over wants, and like your request to the universe will hit the management's table better if it's a need than it is a want.
You hit on a very, very good point, because in my presentation in the book too, I mentioned, look, there are a variety of things that you can go after, but I prefer that you work on the process instead of the solids. This principle works very easy for having stuff, but it works also with becoming something, being something, and also comes with doing something. Like I ask people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I ask people who are 40 the same question that I ask people who are 14, because a lot of people don't know. They take one day at a time. They work a job they hate until they're fired, and then they go find something else. They don't have a plan. They don't have a dream. They don't know if they want to be a doctor or if they want to be a welder. And I think when I start working with people, I work with focusing on what they want to be first. And it doesn't really matter where you are. It doesn't really matter how old you are. I didn't write my first book until I was 52 years old. Now I've written 10 of them. It does not matter how old you are. You may think you're done, but you're not. And within reason, you could say, well, I want to be president of the United States. You're probably not going to make that because there's only one. You need to be something that you have a reasonable probability of achieving. Like if you want to be a college professor, or you want to be a counselor, you want to be an architect, these things are achievable. Anybody who puts their effort toward it can achieve that. And I think that's where most people are lost.
Yeah, I'd love to be a rock star. I just can't sing or play an instrument. So I should knock that down a couple of steps and maybe want to work as a manager of a rock star or something.
Or try to do Milli Vanilli, only better.
Yeah, just play the recording. Don't say anything. But you look at guys like, or the stories of people who manifest things. Jim Carrey, who carried around the $10 million check in his wallet, saying that, or the picture of the Mustang bike when he was a kid, saying, "Someday I'm going to get this bike." And focus, just that was the picture he was focusing on, that someday I'll get this bike. I don't know how, but I will. I just confident I will, and then gets it. But he was a kid at the age those bikes were available for kids, and somebody put his name on a raffle ticket, and he got it. The $10 million check, he carried it around with him as a fledgling stand-up comedian. Well, he was in a position as a stand-up comedian to possibly, he was in the entertainment industry, no matter how close to the beginning, but he was actually in it. So, yeah, okay, he got a movie and got a check for $10 million a few years later. And he'd show the $10 million check to his fellow comedians, and they go, oh, you are a comedian. You think you're going to get $10 million. But he put that out there. And he's big into manifestation and just asking for things. But you're I think you're spot on by saying, if you're in a position where you can't walk, then you're not going to make it as a pro athlete. Focus,
go back to Jim Carrey's story. He didn't do nothing until he got
exactly
the $1 million movie deal. He answered every phone call, every email, showed up for every audition, because that is what resonated with his dream. Every single hint of a vibration that resonated with that idea of that $10 million check, which I think he had a pretty good idea how he was going to get it. He wasn't going to win in the lottery. He was going to get a movie deal. He took the jobs. He ended up, I think it was on Fridays, wasn't it? It wasn't Saturday Night Live. It was the other comedy station. He ended up as Fireman Bob or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's where he made, national exposure. And from there, it went. And then he just got one movie deal after another. I mean, Yes Man was one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And it's like you say, it's basically, don't be swinging above your weight class. Like unless you're going to work up to that weight class, you've got to do the work. You can't just sit on the couch and say, I want this. And unless it's related to sitting on the couch, you're probably not going to get it.
Like, who is it that said, Lord, I want to win the lottery. Lord, I want to win the lottery. Lord, I want to. And finally, the angel came to him and said, look, first you got to go buy a ticket.
Yeah. Exactly. We are speaking to Brooks Agnew, and we're talking about his one of his actually, not your latest book, but a very interesting book, Remembering the Future, The Physics of the Soul and Time Travel. You can also get this if you go over to his website, Brooks Agnew. I was going to say Brooks Agnew blog. It's called. Go to rememberingthefuture.com. Would be an easy way to get there, or is there an easier way?
Yeah, and you can go to brooksagnew.com. It's on the bookstore. The interesting thing about the book is if you buy the paperback or the Kindle version, I will give you the audio version of it for free.
Nice.
And if you're only into audiobooks, it's not available on Audible because I felt it was too expensive for people. Mm-hmm. So I sell the book for $7.95 in audio on my website because I really want it to get out there. And although millions of people have heard the stories in that book, and I do, I don't know, 6 to 8 conferences a year and probably speak to 5,000 or 6,000 people face to face a year about it, there is something in that book for you. It will make a breakthrough for you. No matter what you do. I don't care if you sell real estate or if you're a high school junior. That book will make breakthroughs for you.
Oh, perfect. Because one of the things I like about the audiobooks is, well, first of all, I've been at a number of conferences here, and I've, picked up a couple of books from authors I thought would be interesting. But I tell you, if they don't have pictures in there, you're just going to go, it's got to be a picture book. But I love the audiobooks. I can just start doing something around the house, put the thing on, and go for it. And it's great. So again, go to brooksagnew.com, go to the books, and check out. You've got about 10 books, actually, don't you? 10 or
I have 10 books.
Yeah, 10 books out right now. Yeah, but Remembering the Future and the Physics of Soul and Time Travel. In one of the write-ups about that book, it may have been, it talks about may have been the downward causation that started what we know as the Mandela effect. In learning how to, and also learning how to dream properly. So these are two subjects I really wanted, 2 points that I really want to amplify, which is a bizarre legal term when I'm standing up on the stand giving evidence in front of a judge. I need to amplify that, Your Honor, please. So my statement, I can expand on it without being yelled at for talking too much. But let's start off by how to dream properly. Is that something that we can do? Is that a conscious thing? Or is it a learned a skill that we can learn?
Yeah, it's a skill. Most people are. I mean, every being on this planet is conscious, but humans are the only ones that can perceive time. However, most humans are not conscious that they're conscious. I mean, when they sleep, they're unconscious, and that's when they dream. When they're awake, they're conscious, and they're rational, and they don't dream very much. What happens to human beings, and I think it's because of our modern culture, because I think ancient natives and shaman, they did this by way of training from a very young age. But we're not trained to do this, not in school, and very few homes teach it. And I don't think hardly any churches teach it. But we have 2 aspects to us, the subconscious and the conscious. And to properly dream, what we really want to do is we want to engage the conscious mind with the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind runs about 1,000 times faster than the conscious mind. And the subconscious mind can pierce time. You can go back in time in your life and you can re-experience things over and over again. And we often do that. And unfortunately, a lot of us will write scripts that enable us to repeat the same failure codes over and over and over again. That's why women, are constantly attracted to men who abuse them, or men go into business and one business after another fails for the same reason, or they have test anxiety, or a variety of things. But we write these scripts of failure for ourselves, and then we just repeat it over and over again. And to learn to properly dream, we connect the conscious mind with the subconscious mind. And I do teach people how to do this. In the book, I have meditation training in the back of the book that teaches you the flower of life meditation, because it's very efficient and effective. I'm a busy guy. I own 4 businesses, and they take a lot of my time. I don't have time to sit around and meditate for 2 or 3 hours a day. I'm not a yogi or a shaman or a guru of any kind. When I meditate, it needs to be 17 breaths, and I'm in. And then I developed what I call the 18th breath, and I teach that to you as well in the book. Once you get good at this meditation and begin connecting with your heart, which is actually the other conscious organ in your body, you will get better and better at properly dreaming. And you will be able to do it almost, on command. And I don't recommend driving while you're doing it, but when you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to fix a machine, or you're trying to design a building, or you're trying to resolve an issue, you can access this and you can transcend the present significantly, and you can bring in information. That's why I called the book Remembering the Future. You can go to the future, access information that isn't available yet. You can remember it, and you can bring it back to now. And yes, it is possible to choose another future. When I wrote the book in 2007, millions of people heard the story, hundreds of thousands of people learned the skills, and it began splintering little tiny fractures in the timelines. That's when the Mandela effect began, when these strange glitches in what we know darn good and well is pure memory. But when we go back and check the record on Google or Yahoo, or go back and actually physically look at a YouTube of, say, an old Disney movie or something that we know the lines to it. We remember the lines to it, but now they're different, at least in the recorded version. It's because these little splinters in the timelines began occurring as this book and the skills that I teach in it began to proliferate. And it hasn't changed anything major that I know of, other than what happened in 2015, because we missed that total catastrophe that I saw from 2007. Barely, but we missed it. In other words, we chose another future. People don't know this, but if you research the scriptures, and I'm specifically talking about the Bible, it's pretty prophetic in the way that it's written. But there's one big thing missing from the Bible. I mean, a really big, glaring thing missing from the Bible. Us. The United States, the richest, most powerful, most influential nation in the history of the world. It's not there. Why? Because it wasn't on that timeline. When the founding fathers, who all learned to read by reading the Bible, they knew exactly where the world was headed because they were taught it. Everyone was taught it. Mm-hmm. And they decided to choose a new future. They formed a government that answered to the people. That had never been done before. It had never been done before. Nobody ever considered rights given to a people by God, not by government, but by God. That had never been thought of before, never even been prophesied of before. So they built it, and it changed the world. We are now on a new timeline. And I have to say, for 241 years, there has been an enormous force trying to get the world back on that original timeline. And we're experiencing that war right now.
Now, when you say back on the original timeline...
Back on the original timeline, where one man ruled the world with wooden ships and his army. It doesn't work that way anymore. We're a free people. We rule ourselves. That global syndicate has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and they don't like people being sovereign at all.
Well, they're just going to have to live with that. Damn it.
Well, maybe so, maybe not. I will tell you this. They know the principles in this book are true because they use them every single day. They force us to listen to their mantra in music and news and media and movies and everything else. They force us to listen to it every single day, multiple times a day, so that we will put our conscious energy signature on their goal, their dream. And so far, it's been working pretty well.
Well, it's been 2,000 years. We'll cut them some slack. We have expanded. We have expanded consciously as a race of people, and we continue to grow. It's almost like that bubble, my manifestation bubble that leaves me and continues to get up, push out, like the little mini Big Bang. We continue to grow, and for somebody to come in and try to stifle that, it's that's a big feat without basically waiting for like one of those. A few good catastrophes, maybe a few volcanoes going off and another solar flare like we had back in 1859. But, you'd have to push us back almost to horse and buggy in this day and age.
That would be interesting if we were taken out of our electronic neuro network that we've had for 23 years now. If we were taken out of that and pushed back to, where we had a phone with a dial on it instead of buttons, and long distance and no ability to text or send data to each other, boy, that would... I mean, for me, all that stuff's an upgrade anyway. For you, it's probably you're hardwired to it. But this next generation coming, they don't even know what clockwise means.
Oh, yeah, my youngest daughter, she's 16 now, and I think I remember her being 12 or 13, couldn't read a clock, like a regular dial clock. She'd stare at it. If it didn't have the numbers on it, she would just stare at it. And I go, what are you doing? It's like, what does that mean? It's like,
my son's like 34 years old, and he said, which way do you turn? I said, turn it clockwise. He said, what? I said, just turn it clockwise. Dad, what are you saying? What do you mean clockwise? What does that mean? And I realized he'd only had digital clocks his whole life, so he didn't know what I meant.
Yeah, it's like driving it into my kid's head. We're doing something. It's lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. Now, hurry up. Figure that out. Come on. Oh, and by the way, righty is clockwise. What? Why did you say clockwise? What does that mean? It's a wise clock. Oh, my God. We speak English, but not the same language. Yeah. That's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. There's actually a cool... I haven't seen it, but it's an interesting film out, directed by Danny Boyle. A guy named Richard Curtis wrote it. It was based on Curtis's story from years ago. But there was this kid who basically... he remembers, and he knows all the Beatles songs, but no one else in the world knows who the Beatles were.
Yeah.
He Googles it. He comes up with the bug. Like, what do you mean you don't know who the Beatles are? So he ends up playing their music and writing their music and becomes famous, and he just walking around shaking his head going, what the hell is going on here? But it's again, that's the Mandela effect in reverse, where he's Mandela and everybody else in the world has gone somewhere else. It's like, I woke up one day and I'm the only one who remembers this part of history. I should take a glance at that film. It's probably a cute little film, but it's similar. It's similar to the kind of an effect of not knowing, just having bits and pieces of our future modified. So when we get there and then go past it, in hindsight, it's skew.
Reminds me of a story. It was about 16 years ago. My 14-year-old daughter comes up to me and says, Dad, have you ever heard of a band called the Beatles? And I went, yeah, I've heard of them. She said, their music is really good. I thought it was just great.
Yeah. Who are the Beatles? Oh, that's Paul McCartney's band. Who? Paul McCartney's first band. Never mind. We're talking to... who are we talking to? Brooks Agnew. this is fascinating. The stuff that you've been talking about, and your meditation, is your meditation the Merkaba? That?
Yeah,
that's the meditation
called Flower of Life meditation. Merkaba basically means the spirit, the body, and the energy that makes up the body. The Merkaba. It's like a star tetrahedron, two tetrahedrons pushed one into the other, tip first, so you end up with kind of looks like a Star of David, but in 3D. This is the energy shape of the human body and of planets and stars.
Right. That's interesting. It's a type of meditation I haven't done. We had a thing not too long ago. It was called the Muse, and the Muse is a device you put on your head, hook up to your iPhone, and listen to it. And with your brain or the brain waves, you can control the sounds. Like I put it on where it's controlling the water as it rushes up against on the beach, and the wind and the birds. And if you hit that meditation, that right frequency, you hear birds and it's very peaceful. But when you get off frequency, the birds go away, the waves crash, the wind comes up, and eventually it teaches you to know exactly when you hit that frequency. And so after a while, after a few months, you don't even need it anymore. You can just kind of zone out anytime you're around. And it's a very, very interesting device. So I kind of skipped a lot of the regular meditations, and I'll just turn that on in my head. But now I have to be a little more conscious of what I'm thinking of while I'm meditating, which I never got into. So this Merkaba is something that I should be looking into, I think.
Yeah, I like the biofeedback systems. I like them a lot. It does teach you how to, what it feels like to get your vibrational level to the right frequency so that you're in this kind of a delta state.
Yeah.
And when you're in that state, what you're basically doing is you're entraining the conscious mind with the subconscious mind. I told you the subconscious mind has a frequency about 1,000 times higher than the conscious mind, but it doesn't mean that harmonically they can't be aligned. If you could ever speed your conscious mind up to match your subconscious mind, I don't know, you might disappear, but but you can hit harmonics, and then it can be constructively interfering, and that's something that can give you great power. Your intellect will have a great amount of energy around you, and people will feel it.
And send me $1 million so I can buy a truck and an apartment and pay my bills off. One of the things that your book, Remembering the Future, The Physics of Soul and Time Travel, it talks about a lot of it is unleashing the power that we have within ourselves, and pointing out that we do have this ability. We can manifest. If you do it properly, you can manifest pretty well anything. But I've been told once, when you get really good at manifesting, there's no really need to be here anymore, and you get called back to the mothership. The lightning bolt hits, or you step out in front of a bus. But to empower ourselves to make our the informed choices that we make in our lives, improving our future, and what we create and what we create around us. Each of us, as we do that, and as each of us grow, those are the individuals and those are the people that are needed in the next chapter of humanity.
Well, yeah, and maybe we have several different chapters being written at the same time, because I would like to say that mankind is waking up. But I know 2018 was kind of the year of awakening for a lot of us, because we became aware of forces that are working around us. I don't think we were really aware of that before. I think they were pretty much hidden because that's the way it was designed. And somebody asked me at the end of 2018, well, if you had to name 2018 for something, what would you call it? I said, well, honestly, I think it was the year of awakening. And he asked me, what do you think about 2019? And I said, I think I'm going to call 2019 the year of light. Because in the last, 10 or 12 years, for sure, programs like yours and mine and others, we have been establishing light all over the world, little pockets here and there. And at first I thought, with the electronic neural network that we've put together, that maybe we're all supposed to gather together, like maybe at Area 51 or maybe
on the top of Devil's Tower.
Yeah, on the top of Devil's Tower or something. We're all supposed to go. But, I now realize that we're not supposed to do that. What we're supposed to do is turn the light up in the place where we are, in our little towns and cities and big cities and rural areas. And the whole world will then have these bright points of light all over it. I hate to sound like George H.W. Bush, but the point is that it would begin driving darkness back into the shadows where it belongs. But then I also realized that as intensely as we have been working, the dark side has been working that much harder. Yeah. So I would like to think that the race of mankind is awakening, that its frequency is becoming higher. But then I look around and I see that there's a tremendous amount of darkness. There's a tremendous amount of what we call NPCs, these non-player characters, who are going through life running a short script of hatred and darkness and prejudice over and over and over and over again in their minds. They will never become anything as long as they keep running that program. But they don't care because they just don't have enough thought going on in their head to care. But they're dangerous. They're dangerous because they beat people up, because they burn cars, because they break windows, they put masks on and they roam the streets and, harm innocent people. They're dangerous. And I don't know if just being light can drive them back into the darkness where they belong. I don't know. So I don't know if the whole human race is waking up, but I know some of us are, and we live in a constant state of amazement.
Mine was November 2012, the first time I had seen a psychic ever, and who knew way too much about me and my dead mother and all those other things. And one of the things that she passed on to me is that I could read oracle cards like she could, and I kind of shook my head and walked away. But one of the things I found I could do is I could look at somebody and basically I could tell them, I would suggest to them to Google the word empath. And my business cards that I've put a thing on the back of it that it says notes, and I write the word empath on there, and I'll hand it to them and say, I know it's a really weird thing, but you should really Google this. But don't read too much into it about being affected by crowds and things like that. It means a lot more than what you'll find on Google. And I'll look at them and I'll say things like, you still wake up between 3 and 4:30 in the morning? And they go, yeah. Do you which side of the family, is it your mother's side has the Irish side? And they'll look at me and go, yeah. And then I'll go, and we'll go, or First Nations or Central American or Aboriginal somewhere, and they'll just stare at me, and I'll say, yeah, well, you'll have to Google this. You have a very high vibration, and I don't know any other way other than to explain that or say that to you. And it's giving them my card with that word on it is like the silver bullet, as the Lone Ranger would ride off into the distance. It was like, here, look into this, because it'll explain a lot of the stuff that's been going on in your life and why you attract narcissists and why your anxiety is high and why you take on other people's problems. That seemed to be my divination for the first few years. I could do that. I still do it. But man, oh man, that first 2 or 3 years, I could see them. It was almost like I could see them in a crowd, just glowing, coming out of the crowd. And things have changed since then, and I'm a full-on evidential medium now, which I guess I always had been, but I'm now a little more confident with that. It is and like you say, in 2018, it seemed to be, it's like all the people I had talked to about that since 2012 all showed up at the same house and went, yes, we all are that way, and we continue to tell people that too. At one point, someone told me that 5% of the population were empaths, and I had to call BS on that, because that's probably just because there was no study ever done of how many empaths. But I think most of us are, and it's just whether or not it turns on, or where you may be in your life when actually someone points it out to you, whether even you need it pointed out to you. It's just who we are. And in times of great disaster and things, or hardship, it'll come to the surface because it'll be very helpful. And one of the episodes I used to have was called The Shift, and it was a live show and had psychics on it, and people would call in, and we talked about things that could come. And we talked a little bit about this before we went on the air, about if there was no electrical, or there was no, if there was a great schism in our society where there was good against bad, or us against them, or whatever, that we talked about, it'd be good to throw a few seeds together and be ready for something. And a lady called in from back east, and she said, well, if somebody came to my door and wanted my seeds, what should we do? What should I do? And I said, well, first of all, they're not yours. If you get that out of your head, that they were your seeds, that they're our seeds, it would be a lot easier to deal with, because you could invite that person in and say, look, we could probably get more done together than we could do with your M16 and my AR here, arguing back and forth and shooting at each other. Why don't we just all come together? You could probably fix my roof, and I could bake you a pie, and we can make a community out of this. It's the negative, or the more negative ones, I think they're going to have an issue. The ones who are more positive and inclusive, I think, will make community again. And it's my gut feeling, and in my heart of hearts, I think they're going to be the higher vibration people.
Yeah, I think you're probably onto something there. We have a tendency in any societal structure, we have a tendency to break apart into 80-20s. That is to say, 80% of the people are consumers and 20% of the people are the producers. In other words, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Mm-hmm. And it's always been that way. But with respect to empaths, I think a lot of people have empathic abilities, but you have to be careful, because empaths have a tendency to pick up on strong forces that are around them and reflect them. So, for instance, if an empath walks into a room where somebody is, really having anxious feelings, that is to say, maybe they're overcome with envy, or they're overcome with jealousy, or overcome with hatred, the empath will pick up on that, and they'll start reflecting it. They'll become irritable. They'll become easily excitable. They'll anger easily, and they can't figure out why. They can't. Why am I doing this? Why am I snapping at this person? Why is my temper short? It's because somebody is in the room that has those strong emotions, and they're empathically picking up on them. So an empath has to be aware and has to be sovereign, so that they know who they are. It's sort of like, when you were really young, maybe you would get high, or maybe you experimented with drugs. You realized what was real because you could tell yourself, oh, it's just the drug. But an empath can't always do that. They can't always say, oh, somebody's in the room with these emotions. It's very difficult to tell the difference between an outside influence that's coming in on you, making you anxious, and yourself making yourself anxious. So you have to be sovereign. You have to have some baseline that you recognize that is you, so you can tell when you're being influenced. Because an empath is extremely sensitive. What empathic means, or empathy means, for those of you that are listening, is basically being able to walk in someone else's shoes. So if they are having an experience in their life, an empath can resonate with that experience, because they spiritually can put themselves in the other person's shoes. And it's a great skill, but it's also dangerous. You have to be able to protect yourself against the strong personalities and egos that are around you.
Yeah, it is dangerous. My oldest daughter is extreme. She's very, very high vibration, and she was very, I think the psychologist called her oppositional defiant disorder. Like, we'd say it's a nice day, she'd say it was a crappy day. Just completely always negative, wanted to be left alone. And I took her to a psychic, and the psychic said, "Oh my God, she freaking glows." And within an hour, the psychic taught her how to block. She went back to the child psychologist for her second appointment, and her child psychologist said, "Oh, she's cured. What did you do?" I said, "Don't tell her that you went to a psychic who taught you how to block and deflect. Deflect." All her friends people she didn't know would come up to her and say, "Hey, my mom's got cancer. I feel really bad." And my daughter would come home and just want to leave me alone. At the age of 13, 14, she had no idea why she was taking on everybody else's crap and emotion. And the psychic taught her to block it. And she was fine. And she still is fine. I did the same thing as a Mountie. I didn't have a trainer with me. I was in northern Alberta in a smaller town. And you'd call me out and say, "Hey, James, somebody stole my car." And by the time I left you, Brooks, it was somebody stole our car.
Yeah, right.
I give 20% of myself to you, but that's good for 5 people a day. And I was screwed. I lived in a converted jail cell from the 1930s. That was single men's quarters. So I just go back. I literally go to jail every night, crash on the bed, alarm would go off, poof, back into work the next day. But I would put hours into a stolen car file that was literally, here's a file number, the car's put on the computer in case someone sees it, and I'll drive by the quarry where the kids dumped the stolen cars. That's it. It's insured. It's not a homicide file. You don't need aerial photographs and interviewing the entire neighborhood. Just relax. It's going to be okay. So it took a while for a guy. It was 9 months. And a guy came to me and says, "No, empathize with people, but do not take on their burden because it's not yours."
That's right.
Yeah, in hindsight, I was just thinking, "Oh my God, that would have been a lot easier 9 months than I went through," and a lot of that unpaid overtime, bastards. But yeah, it is absorbing that. I find, looking back at it too, as a kid growing up, I could stand on the street watching the crowds go by, and to me it was like moving water. And then there were 2 or 3 people in that crowd that literally stood out because they were of an energy that was not similar to everybody else in the crowd.
Yep.
And I'd sit and watch them. And I remember pointing them out once to we're waiting in line on one side of the street, waiting to go to a movie. And I pointed out to my date and said, "Hey, look, there's something going to happen over here. There's about 5 or 6 people. Can you see them?" And she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I could see these 5 or 6 people that just didn't flow with the rest of the people walking. Next thing you knew, a van pulled up, and these 5 or 6 people were all undercover cops when running into a business and raided it. But their energy was completely different from everybody else on the street. And I could see it, and I couldn't figure out why no one else could.
Interesting.
Again, hindsight, right? I guess we all have different levels of empathy or that ability or vibration. It's just, it's identifying it. And it just took me a long time, up until 2012, when someone pointed it out to me, that yes, those things you used to see that you thought were ghosts really were ghosts, and we can move on from here. It's like, shit, really? They were ghosts? Okay, that makes sense now. Now what do I do? And move on. So yes, I was a policeman, and I saw dead people, and years ago I saw dead people, quote unquote. So it was a little bit awkward. Yeah, it's. I really appreciate the type of things you write about and the number of the books that you have out. And I also see that you were not only talking at Disclosure Con, that you've got some other things coming up. Well, you will be a contact at the desert, right?
Yeah, I was at Contact in the Desert last May, and I've been invited to come back again this next May. Mm-hmm. In April, I will be at the Human Origins Conference, or Expo, in New Mexico.
Nice.
So you can find out all these. Go to brooksagnew.com and look at the upcoming events. I try to keep those pretty current. And it's I don't speak as often as I want to because most of the conferences are top secret. They don't market them very well.
Well, the Human Origins one, it's interesting. Yeah, that's April 2nd to the 5th, I think, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But, I kind of know about that one because I think my buddy Travis is going to be there, Travis Walton. He's been bouncing around. There's a new movie going to be almost in production, which will hopefully correct all the errors in his original movie, which was absolutely horrible. But so I knew that's how I knew about the Human Origins one anyway. But you're right. Some of these things they don't. I went to AlienCon in LA in June. And if you Googled it a week before the event, it would tell you it was in Dallas. So, hold on. That's in about 8 or 9 months from now. What are you talking about? So it was horrible. Absolutely. Nobody showed up for that one. It was just badly advertised. But, the books, though, you've got a fine array of books. And again, we're talking about, or I wanted to touch upon Brooks's book, Remembering the Future, The Physics of Soul and Time Travel. It has, that's a 90-minute lecture and it's a presentation in itself.
It is. It's 90 minutes, and people have asked me to put it on YouTube, but I have 2 films that I show in there by permission in my live presentations, and I can't put those films in my YouTubes. And they tell specific aspects of things like the Fibonacci sequence, but also resonance theory, because you can't talk about the Fibonacci sequence and manifesting the future without talking about resonance theory. And I mean, I could do it in mathematics. I could show you on a graph or a graphic of some kind. But when you see the film and you see how constructive interference and destructive interference work in sound, and then again in light, it sinks in. You really get it. You understand why. It says in the scriptures, where 2 or more of you come together in my name, if it were possible, with a faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains. That's exactly how it's done. I mean, we think of, great spirits like Jesus or Buddha or some very powerful consciousness comes into our realm. They change the world. But we don't get those very often, maybe once every few hundred years. But what is almost as difficult, but more possible, is getting groups of people to focus on one thing. 100 people or 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people. I mean, if we could get 1 billion people to focus on one problem, we could solve it. We could change the world. If we could align, and that's one thing I'm really hopeful about with this neural network that we have, this internet, which is tying consciousnesses together, synchronizing them all over the world. If we could do it for good, if we could pull people together and have, for instance, a controlled meditation or a single prayer or a single concern for improvement, it would be remarkable what we could get done. There's nothing at all that we could not achieve. We have about 70 or 80 years of fossil fuels, cheap fossil fuels available on this planet. It's kind of a loan that nature has given us. Okay, I'll let you fly and I'll let you drive at 100 miles an hour and I'll let you move freight along steel rails or across the oceans for a few hundred years using all this energy that I've stored up in my crust. But that's only to get you started, only to get you to figure out how to make energy or coax energy from another dimension into our dimension so that you don't have to keep burning me up to to make your energy. And we're getting there. We are getting there. But it's going to take a while before we graduate from a petroleum-based economy to, we're almost there in the United States. Petroleum makes up about 8% of our economy. Other nations, China, India, Russia, it makes up like 50% of their concern. And so it's definitely a petroleum-based economy. If oil gets too cheap, like gets down around 50 or 40 or even $35 a barrel, Russia has no choice. They got to reach out. They got to get aggressive outside their own borders, because they're about 50% of their gross national product is from oil. We're not like that. We could probably, if we had another energy source, we could make the transition pretty easily. I was talking to the Department of Energy with the Trump administration during transition at Trump Tower. This is before they had chosen Rick Perry to run the Department of Energy. And I said, look, you don't need to get rid of all the nuclear power plants. You already have the reactors are there, the grids are there, the turbines are there. Everything's already set up. All you have to do is put a different fuel inside the reactor, one that's not radioactive, but will make your steam for you. And I told them what you need is helium-3. Helium-3 can replace uranium and fission as the heat source. You don't need these radioactive neutrons to boil water anymore. You can do it with non-radioactive neutrons from helium-3. And it is only 2 days away. And it's just laying around. You don't have to worry about ruining the environment. All you have to do is go get it. And hopefully that's where we're going to be going next year. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I tell you that my Tesla is the fastest car I've ever driven.
I have two pickup trucks that are faster than any truck in my neighborhood, that's for sure.
Oh, man, I had the old 1970 Corvette with the big LT1 engine in it, 370-plus horse, and this little Tesla 3 dual motor. Oh, my God. I get... it's like pulls almost 1G, and I think, okay, now not only am I going too fast, but nobody can hear me coming.
Yeah.
And it's black, so you can't see me either. But it is kind of crazy. The advances, and look at the advances. Now, you have experience in electric cars. Like that is a part of your portfolio.
Yeah, that's one of the companies that I own is an electric truck company.
And which is fascinating if you look at where we were 15 years ago on electric vehicles. It was, it was a battery that weighed 1,000 pounds, if not more. It was just a big, clunky old battery that it really couldn't run the thing very long. You needed gas to help it out. And
we got 80 amp hours out of it, too. I mean, we had 144 volts, but we had 80 amp hours. Now we have 360 amp hours, and we're running at almost 170 volts, and the vehicles my trucks go about 150 miles on a charge, but they also cost half what the other electric vehicles do.
Yeah.
But my trucks are designed for fleets, not for going between San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Yeah, mine is 399 miles a charge. But, it's, again, I took it down to AlienCon thinking, I won't have to pay for gas. This is a nice, clean way of traveling. Forgetting that every night I have to go into a hotel. So, okay, it just cost me twice as much. I could have flown down and stayed in the Bel Air Hilton or something. For what I paid on hotels between here and LA and back. And
it's true.
10 days there and 5 days there, 5 days back. So.
Because you got to charge up overnight. It's a different mentality.
Yeah.
Fleet owners, they're only driving maybe 120 miles a day, but their routes, they run 6-8 routes in 8 hours, and then they're done.
Yeah, which is great. Like I can get a full charge from dead in 45 minutes at a supercharger.
You don't want to keep doing that because it'll charge that battery.
Yeah, and there's a limit. You can go up. The full charge is for the extended drive, the 399-mile one, but at about 280, is like if you're just driving it around and you don't want to supercharge the thing up too much, like to max it. And they tell you that when you buy it too. And now it's plugged in, and it's like out of 110 volt out of my house, so it gives
the battery in the 3 is about $20,000, so that's a hell of an investment in a battery.
Oh yeah, and they're all made up of little batteries that look like a pop can, a soda can.
16 850s.
Yeah, which is a lot better than the big clunky what looked like boat batteries when I was a kid. The big aviation batteries, all lead. And when one of those goes, and it's a 6-minute replacement on a battery, which is freaking me out as it is. Like, what do you mean 6 minutes? Oh yeah, you just put it up on a rack. Takes us 4 minutes to undo all the bolts. 2 minutes to pop the thing up and pull the 2 batteries out, stick 2 ones in. It's done in 6 minutes. I'm going, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
It's like you guys all work at NASCAR or something. You're in, you're out.
Well, there are 1,168 batteries in a Model 3, and my truck has 96. But we use a flat kind of pillow battery, and we use a different chemistry. The Model 3 uses what's called a lithium air battery that has to be submerged to keep it cool, and my truck runs on lithium iron phosphate, which can be air cooled.
Oh, nice!
It's not flammable.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, because that's before I bought it, I was thinking, I heard about these catching fire for no apparent reason.
Well, they keep them submerged in glycol.
Yeah,
it's just all in the metal that they use to commute the electrons. Nissan uses lithium manganate, which is highly toxic. If those batteries get breached, you got to call in a hazmat team. The real battery that we're waiting for is vanadium. What we want is a vanadium battery. That is 5 valence states. It'll give us 5 volts instead of 3.25 volts, and it will give us 30 to 40,000 charge cycles, which your grandkids would be inheriting that battery.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's something that would be a lot better than what we're sitting on now, but it's coming. It's we talk about this like you're waiting for this next generation of battery, the next generation of power. It is. We can see it from where we're sitting.
Well, the only way it's going to come is, and I hate to say this, I don't want to say it wrong, but the only way it's going to come is if we take the Chinese out as the primary battery makers in the world. As long as the Chinese are making batteries, we're stuck in their rare earth world. But if we can get the tariffs in place and stop the dumping of cheap batteries or the hoarding of lithium in one company, then we'll see vanadium batteries. We'll see vanadium batteries in the next 5 years, and that'll change everything.
While I've got you, I know we're getting close. We've got only about 10 or 15 minutes left here. One of the things I did want to squeeze in, and again, listener, the talk that Brooks does on remembering the future, the physics of soul and time travel, is 90 minutes. And one of the things that he covers in that talk, which we haven't touched on yet, is overcoming the 5G environment. I hate to squeeze it into 10 or 15 minutes, but could we squeeze that into 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah. In the cell phone world, when I owned one of the first cell phones that came out in Nashville, Tennessee, it was a bag phone. It had a 5-watt transmitter on it. I mean, because we didn't have cells everywhere in those days. You had a few cells around town, but not like we have now, where you can pretty much stay on a phone call from Orlando all the way to New York if you want to. As you move along, your call switches over from cell to cell to cell tower, especially if you're with AT&T or Verizon or Sprint, one of the big companies. I mean, sometimes it doesn't make a clean switch. You drop a call, but it's pretty convenient now. In those days, I was the only person in Nashville in my field that had a mobile phone, and it earned me about $100 a day, which was pretty good. Of course, I paid 25 cents a minute for a call, but oftentimes I didn't get the job. unless I had a phone.
Yeah.
So as we built more cell phone towers, the phones themselves had to use less and less power. It cut down to 1 watt and then a half a watt, and that's about where we are now, between 1 watt and a quarter watt. And because the cell is pretty close, and we can tell when we're close to the cell tower because we can see the number of bars we have in the phone. But that being said, the cell towers themselves have to run at about 12 kilowatts, which is a lot. That's like, you got to climb one of those towers, you better turn the power off because you're going to get cooked before you get to the top of the ladder. They're dangerous. They put out a lot of energy. So, and the reason is because the frequency is fairly low, and it takes a lot of energy for that frequency to travel a long way without a lot of loss. So, and we've gone from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G. 4G is pretty good because of the amount of data that we can pack onto the frequency. But the next generation is called 5G, and 5G is getting way up there in the upper microwave frequencies, way up into gigahertz. And it's handy because it's not so easily blocked. But it's handy because it has not very high power requirements. It can get way down low power on the antennas, but you got to have a lot of them. You got to have, instead of one every 5 miles or 4 miles, you got to have one every 2 blocks. And in some cities where you have a lot of skyscrapers, you got to have one on every corner of the building. Mm-hmm. So the issue with this frequency is when you get up to these very high frequencies, you're talking about very short wavelengths. And when you get to these short wavelengths, some of them get very close to harmonic matches with certain molecular bonds. Sort of like when you put a stick of butter in the microwave oven and you turn the microwave oven on, the klyrostron tube inside the microwave in the 1.3 cubic foot resonant chamber that you have inside your microwave, it matches the molecular bond between carbon and oxygen, which is the bond in the fatty acid of the butter. It vibrates that bond, and what happens is that bond heats up, and when it heats up, it melts the butter, and it can boil water. It can also match the frequency between carbon or hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. That bond between the hydrogen and the oxygen is what is vibrated to high frequencies, and that's what makes our high temperatures, and that's what makes water boil. 5G is starting to get to harmonics that will resonate with certain bonds in DNA. And this is what has people worried, because take a look around, everything, including us, is made of DNA. Everything from trees to plants to birds to bacteria to us. And if those frequencies get, close enough to those molecular bonds, they can start either breaking those bonds, heating up those bonds, or even mutating those bonds. And that's where the big worry is coming from. Now, there's a company out there called Huawei. Huawei is the Chinese government for all intents and purposes. And they are aggressively, especially in some of their big ghost cities like Jiangsu City and Shenzhen, and these, I call them ghost cities. If you've ever been to China, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. They're huge cities with huge skyscraper condos, but they're largely empty. Mm-hmm. And what they're starting to do is outfit all of these cities with 5G, and honestly, it really looks like a big clinical experiment. And I know, the race is on, because the first country that gets to 5G is going to have these incredible data speeds, and they're going to be able to transfer, files and pictures and video that we only dream about now on cell networks. But if they start having issues with health, with people having some kind of harmful resonance with this 5G, it's going to show up in China first because they're being more aggressive with it. I think we're kind of slow walking it in this country. I think the administration has had enough danger phone calls and worrisome emails and tweets and certain scientists coming out with warnings about, hey, these frequencies are getting pretty close to the resonant frequency of what will excite the bonds in human biology, that we're kind of slow walking. And it's not that we don't want to be first into the technology. We just want to see what effect it has on people. There are some people who think, because we're getting into what's called the neurophonic frequencies, these are frequencies that can communicate directly with the brain. It's the frequencies that human nerves use to saltatorily conduct signals to the brain. So, in other words, if we're listening to music, the cochlea, the inner part of our ear, receives vibrations that resonate with cilia inside our cochlea. Those cilia are attached to tiny nerves, and those nerves transmit those vibrations as electrical pulses to the brain. That electric pulsing is on the frequency of saltatory conduction, which can be mimicked with certain 5G frequencies. Now, I know it sounds kind of spooky, it sounds kind of, sci-fi, but we're talking about, if it falls into the wrong hands, 5G could be used to communicate sounds directly to the human brain without going through your ears. Like your brain is almost the radio receiver. Now, the issue with this is that it's theorized that human brains can be commanded almost, or at least inspired or influenced by frequencies put on the 5G network. And that's a little bit of, it violates our right to biological privacy. This is what people really are concerned about. Is it real? Honestly, I think it's possible. As a chemist, as a physicist, I'm just telling you that it is possible. I have tested neurophones myself. I'm hard of hearing already, and I have tried putting the neurophones on my cheeks and on the occipital bones, and I have actually heard the sounds in my brain without using my ears, just electronic signals. And it does work. So once you get to these neurophonic frequencies, you can communicate directly with the brain with real data, sounds or words or even pictures maybe. And that's what the 5G network has people alerted about.
Amazing. I know that Atlanta in July, it became the first city to have it available on Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, and AT&T. So the towers are up and they're capable of 5G. And it's funny, about 25 years ago, there was a thing called bones, and you'd wear them skiing, and they rested on your collarbone. And the vibration went into your collarbone, and you actually heard music.
Yeah.
So if you could direct vibration in a line, which we can do, we can direct energy through a light, almost like a laser, and various vibrations at an individual, at their sternum or at a bone, or the major upper bones. You could then put information, whether that's music or data or language, into their brain.
Yeah, but that's the old style, and it's considered kind of a hammer.
Oh, yeah.
Underneath human skin is a layer of cells called the glial cells. It is an organ all in and of itself. It has it's like the energy body. It lays underneath the dermis, and it is a very tight network of electrical cells, which are called the glial cells. And the interesting thing about the glials is that when two people come together and they touch, like they touch hands or they hug one another or they're naked with one another, the glial cells, if they resonate one with another, there's a very peaceful kind of security, kind of direct communication, almost soul-to-soul communication, because this energy body resonates with the other energy body. It doesn't work with everyone, but the people that it does work with, it is really quite an amazing feeling. Now, the neurophones, they work with tiny metallic discs about the size of a nickel, but only much, much thinner. And they're just placed on the skin anywhere, cheeks or on your triceps or on the lower back. And when it accesses the glial cells underneath the skin, this is the network that communicates these frequencies. So the 5G, it's not going to hammer your bones. It's going to access those glial cells. And that's what has a lot of people worried. And in Atlanta, when you talk about cell towers, these are not big towers. These are little bitty things. They look like almost like egg beaters. They're that small, and they're just placed here and there around. They're not very expensive. They don't take a lot of power, but you have to have a whole bunch of them, or the network doesn't work. And they've been putting them up for quite a while.
Yeah, there's a list of them out. I think New York is two of the big carriers that have New York. Most of the big cities in the U.S., Sprint has them. L.A., Dallas, Fort Worth, New York.
Have you ever driven
like that?
New York? You ever driven in downtown New York? Try to use a GPS on a phone?
No, sir, I haven't.
The buildings, they're so tall that they block access to the satellites. So you can get lost in Manhattan trying to use a GPS because you can't see the satellites unless you're at an intersection.
Then you hop out because the city's in a grid. Remember numbers? They have numbers on the street. But it's fascinating. It be like trying to use your GPS at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. People don't know that GPS satellites don't work above the 80th parallel on either side of the planet. So if you're above the 80th parallel, you have no GPS communication unless you're up in the air 8 miles.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been north of 60, but back in the day in 91 where I didn't have to worry about GPS.
Right.
I was just worried about getting shot at by a bunch of protesters at a mine up in Yellowknife, which was a whole other life that I had up there. Mm-hmm. We've been talking to Brooks Agnew. He is an author. He is a public speaker. He is a gentleman that you should listen to.
Yes, every Sunday from 8 to 11 Eastern Time at X Squared Radio. And it goes by a couple names, xsquaredradio.com or americafreeradio.com.
Now, if you're looking for X Squared, please just put an X and the number 2. Because it threw me off originally. So X Squared, okay, I'll just enter X Squared. Oh, okay, that number 2 then. So X Squared, and just go to brooksagnew.com and see everything that he's involved in, and his book, or books. I'm narrowing you down to one book, and I apologize. But the one I'm very interested in is the Remembering the Future, the physics of the soul and time travel, and just so you do get a little bit of an idea of the types of things that book does cover. Please just and like he says, you can pick it up. You can find it on, and how I'm going to get it is the audio format. But it covers human Earth symbiosis, resonance theory for human energy insertion, overcoming the 5G environment we just talked about, somatics with light and sound we touched on briefly, along with touching on briefly the 5 forces of the universe, including consciousness, using the observation effect to change the past, the science of proper dreaming for future manifestation, which we touched on so slightly, and how to stop the habit of failure and write a new script. Again, thank you very much, Brooks, for dropping by and entertaining my listener with a whole mind-opening dialogue.
Let's roll.
Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go, what are those voices? Look up for the mountain. Because somebody hide, somebody better hide on through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. We are after you, dead or alive. We are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget yourself. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after now. Run through the hill like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!